All right, this video is going to talk about Linux services. Basically, what is a service? A service is a program that is running all the time and usually waiting to accept connections across the network. So I'm going to connect out to my system so we can do some demo stuff. To start services, you need to be root. So I'm going to go ahead and become root. And we have already done some service management with system control. Right, we started, stopped, checked the status of HTTPD, and we also did some management with of the SSHD service while we were changing the config file. So, like I said, a service is a program that is running all the time. How do those services get started? Well, there is one program that starts when the system starts, and that starts all other services. So on modern Linuxes, that service is the systemd service. On older distributions, the service was called init. So on those older systems, um, there was a file called uh, init tab that would tell you what the system was starting, what run level it was starting. I have a old system we'll look at real quick. Uh, this system is using init. So if we look at this init tab, it tells what the different run levels are. 0 will turn it off. 1 is single user mode. That won't start any network services. 3, full multi-user mode, and X11 run level 5 would start a GUI graphical user interface. So that's the old way with init. If we look at our security standard, one of our items says the system must not initialize a graphical user interface. So if we were using a init-based system, that would mean we need to do run level 3. If we go back to our systemd system, when we look at the init tab, it says, hey, guess what? Init tab is no longer used. Um, if you want to figure out what your current target is, you can run the command system control get default. And if we're looking for equivalent to run level 3, that would be multi-user dash target. Um, Run level 5 equivalent is graphical.target. So for our system, we want it to not start the GUI. So we want it to be multi-user.target, right? That's what the init-tab file said, multi-user.target analogous to run level 3. So our systems are using systemd, and they are starting multi-user.target, which is what we want based on our security standard. So as I mentioned before, just a bit ago, we're talking about we already did some stuff with services. We checked the status. We started and stopped, so I'll stop it. If I check the status again, it says it's not running, right? We started it. If I check the status again, it is running. Um, Lots of services we can restart. Most all of them we can restart, which will stop it, and start it. A lot of services will support a reload, which will cause it to reread its config without stopping or starting. So those are the things we can do to actively manage this service. A couple other things we want to know. Um, for each particular service, we want to know if it's going to start at boot or not. And we can look at the status, and over here it says enabled. If it says enabled, that means it's going to start at boot. Um, Down here where it says active running, that means if it's running right now. So those are not directly related to each other. If it is enabled, it will start at boot, but that doesn't mean somebody has not stopped it at some point or that the service might have crashed. So another way you can see if something is enabled, system control is enabled. HTTPD will show you if the service is enabled. if you would like to disable that service, you could type system control disable HTTP D, and now if we see if it's enabled, it shows it's disabled. But if we check the status, it will show that it's still running. So as I just said, those are related but not directly related between enabled and running. If it's enabled and you want to disable it, if you also want to stop it, if you also want it to stop, you actually have to stop it. So now let's check the status. It's disabled and it's not active. So same goes for if we enable it. We enable it, it's enabled now, but it still isn't running. We would have to start it. I did see a thing that said like dash dash now. I think that might have started it. Yeah, so if you put the dash dash now on it, when you enable it, that will start it. Or if you didn't want to do that, you could just go after you enable it, start it. So um, that's basically an overview of services using system control. We have another security standard item related to services. It says unnecessary services must not be running and must not get started at boot. So a couple commands we can look at. Um, System control list units will show you some information. I need to make this window bigger and it's going to roll off my recording. Yeah. System control list units will show you what's active and is one way to look at the different services. It messes my window up when I make it smaller. So if I look over here, it says what's active, what's running, what's listening. I find the list unit files to be a little more useful. Um, Display a little more useful output. Uh, it shows what's enabled. What's enabled, what's disabled. Um, I had yeah. So then another command that I found earlier that was useful was this one, system control list units dash dash type service, and I could look for running with grep. If you remember from earlier in the semester, you can do exclamation point and the command number from your history. So 296 was a command where I looked for where I ran this command. So I can do exclamation point 296, it'll rerun that. So this shows me all the services that are running. So in this case, we have auditd, cronny, cron, dbus, firewall service. That shows what's running. Uh, Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately, we've got to the point where this system is not really starting and continuing to run any services we need to turn off. So for fun, we're going to um, look at another service. We're going to look at another service. So we're going to look at another command. We looked for running a minute ago. We're looking for enabled now. So system control list unit files. I'm going to look for enabled. And just for demonstration purposes, we're going to pick a service that we can disable. So for our purposes for right now, we're going to disable the SSSD service. I looked that up and it's not really doing anything useful on our systems. And if I look at the status, if I look at the status, it says it's enabled, but it's dead. So it's not starting. It's not doing anything when it starts. So we're going to, for our purposes, we're going to consider the system security services daemon to be our sample service we're going to set as disabled. So as I demonstrated a little while ago, the way we do that, system control disable SSSD. So now if we look at the status, it's disabled. So basically that's just what we wanted to do this module for disabling the service. So back to the security standard quickly for how we should evaluate this if we need to understand whether something is necessary or not. Like I said, our systems are mostly starting services that we need at this point, so that's good. Whatever, I can't find the command I was looking for. But if you want to know if you're evaluating a system for compliance with this, the question is how do you know if its stuff should be running or not? Well, you probably don't at this point because you're new to all this. So a couple of things, dead giveaways is starting unnecessary services. If the graphical user interface is starting, so if we go back up to our item number one, if it's starting the graphical user interface, then that automatically means unnecessary services are running. Another way to answer this is to, provide a list of the services that are running and say, hey, this is the services that are running. I'm not qualified to know what should be running or should not be running. You know, another way to answer that would be to compare it to what's running on a known good server. So your system, if you do all the stuff for modules 7 through 10, will have what should be running. So if the same services are running on the system you're evaluating and no additional services, then you can base your conclusion based on that. And you might be like, Rich, why are you telling us this? I'm telling you this because as part of the project, you have to evaluate another system for compliance with the security standard. And this is one of the items a lot of students struggle with because, like I said, you guys don't really have the knowledge to know what should be running or not. So those are three ways you can run it. Saying you don't know, and somebody who does know should evaluate it. If it's running the GUI, that automatically means it's not. It is starting unnecessary services, and you can compare it to what you have running on your system.